Agnes Creagh. The interview took place on January 9th, 2006 at Ms. Creagh's home at 55 Prospect Street, Apartment 8 in Ridgefield, Maryland. The interview was conducted by Betsy Reed for the Ridgefield Historical Society Oral History Project. Good, let's start. Sit back. Okay, Agnes, I need your full name, your date of birth, and your place of birth.
It's Agnes Elizabeth Creagh, and it was April 9th, 1914, and in Ridgefield.
Okay. Now tell me about your parents. What was your father's name?
William A. Creagh.
Creagh?
Yes.
Okay. And your mother?
Mary Brady Creagh.
Okay. And did they both come over from Ireland?
Yes.
Do you know the stories?
Well, each of them came around 1892. Not together. Neither of them was married at that time. And my father came to. They both came into New York, but I'm trying to think of the name of it. Well, I'll think of it later.
Okay.
And my mother came to an aunt in New York.
Was it Ellis Island?
Hmm?
Ellis Island?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that was the only place in this general area.
Right.
From Ireland. No, that's not true.
No?
Because I know people came to Philadelphia too. And whether that was directly or not, I don't know. So you better not
take your word for it.
Take my word for that. My father and mother came to Ridgefield. Oh, I'll get them married first, I guess. They got married in 1899 in New York City.
Okay, so that's where they met.
Yes. No, they didn't meet in New York City. My mother worked as a lady's maid for a wealthy lady in New York. And it was the custom then among some wealthy people to get away from New York for the winters. And this lady had a train, private train, or shared a private train, and they went to Santa Barbara, California, for the winter. And it happened that my father, at that time, worked for a doctor. He was, believe it or not, a gentleman's gentleman. And the doctor took him to California, along with, and the wealthy lady, you see, was taking her doctor along.
Oh, so.
So, my father and mother met on the train on the way to Santa Barbara. And although there's no written proof of it, somebody reported that on the way out, she shared with another employee of the lady that she, after looking over anyone else on the train, she decided it was very slim pickings for them. My father preferred to not believe that, of course. But, Dr. Flint, the name of the man, my father worked for eventually moved to Ridgefield and brought my father with him. And by that time, I don't know exactly what happened in there, how it got arranged, but anyhow, a short time later, I think about 1900, my father was working for a man in Ridgefield, a man named George Haven, and that meant he was a caretaker for that family, and they had a home down on West Lane, large piece of property, and they used that as their summer home, and they lived in New York in the wintertime around in the East 50s somewhere. I don't know whether I'm saying this in any good order.
This is fine.
Well, of course, if there's any question about that, I can't verify any of it.
It's okay. Do you remember the woman's name that your mother worked for?
Wait a minute, I can't. Gosh, I knew it well.
Maybe we can come back to it.
Yeah,
too?
maybe I can.
Okay, let's come back to it. Maybe it'll come up in conversation. Okay, so your father worked for George Haven.
That's, yes, he worked for Mr. Haven from about 1900. I don't know the exact date, but it was about then, because they were married, I think, in 1899, and he was working in New York then, and my brother was born in 1901 or 1902, and I think he was born in Havens, in Ridgefield. And as a matter of fact, he was the first child, and he went to Peter Parley School, down
West Lane.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, what were your brothers and sisters' names? How many kids were there?
There were 5 girls: Margaret, Catherine, Mary, Alice, and Agnes, and one boy who was the first
He was the
child,
oldest.
and he was William Creagh. William P. Creagh, he was.
Now, did you all live at Havens? Did you have a house there?
Yes. They had a house that belonged to the Havens that was like the caretaker's house.
Okay.
And they lived in it.
And your brother went to the Peter Parley School?
Yeah, I don't know for how long. And I think I think he was the only one who went to it. Excuse me. Pop then changed jobs. The exact year I don't know, but before 1914, because I was born up at Colonel Conley's home, and that was the property they owned was at the top of what is now Bennett's Farms Road. Bennett's Farms Road originally was their driveway, And if you happen to notice, if you go on Bennett's Farms Road, as you approach it from Danbury Road, it has a very lovely stone wall.
Yes.
And that was the stone wall bounded their driveway.
Oh.
And that was a pretty long driveway up to the house, and that house eventually became Fox Hill Restaurant, and had a couple of other houses on it. In one of which I was born.
Wow! So
yeah, we're scattered around the town.
Well, that's a really well-known name, Colonel Conley.
Oh,
Colonel
yes.
Conley.
Well, they developed a very large nursery, and I think the nursery, it's safe to say at that time, the nursery was probably known almost throughout the country. And they had property along Route 7 from, well, almost from there to down to what is now what's the bunch of houses? Fox Hill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was part of their property. It then became Fox Hill. No, Fox Hill Inn was from their house
Outpost?
up on the top.
The Outpost Inn?
Yeah, Outpost.
And Outpost Nursery. Where was the nursery exactly? Do you remember?
It was up at the intersection of Route 35 and Route 7.
Okay.
On the left-hand side of the road as you go north.
Okay.
And that was several things. It was the office of the nursery. It was not headquarters, some kind of an office of Gaines Dog Food, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And it also was a dog kennel. And then it's been not an inn, a restaurant at least,
Yeah.
that has been owned by a number of companies.
Yeah.
But in Ridgefield, Conley's and Outpost Nursery was a well-known spot, and everyone everyone in Ridgefield was sort of interested in the Conley family.
Mm.
Colonel Conley was a colonel in World War I, and whether he was a colonel, whether that his regiment was the New York Regiment or not, I rather think it was, but he was pretty well known around. And Mrs. Conley was the daughter of George Errett, whom you might not know, but at that in the early days, Errett beer was pretty well known. And as a result of the fact that her family was engaged in a commercial things such as beer, they were not really accepted in New York society as they would otherwise have been. And some people thought that was pretty amusing.
Because it was
considered... just the idea that would affect your ability to be accepted in New York society.
Oh.
And also, then and for a while afterward, Ridgefield common citizens were very interested in everything that the wealthy members of the community did, and somehow would get to know a good many of the things that happened to them. And people were always interested when these young people got married and had fancy weddings and such. And in at least a few families, long-time friendships, real friendships, were made between the people who worked for a family and the family members. And that was sort of remarkable.
Yeah.
And it happened in our family. My mother, for instance, came to Havens pretty much as a bride. And at that time, well, Havens had one son and 2 daughters. And one of those daughters was about 14 or 15 when my mother came there. It's funny how I can't. Yeah. And they remained very good friends for life. Wow. And that wasn't a unique thing. There's a woman, who lives just a couple of houses from here, Olga Belagamba. Oh, she was Olga Belagamba. She's now Olga Cohen. She had a very pleasant and close relationship with a woman, originally Alice Doubleday. She then was Mrs. Holbrook. And Olga worked for Mrs. Holbrook for a good many years. And she still has connections with Alice's children and grandchildren. She spoke to me about that some months ago, which is another remarkable instance.
Huh. Wow. So, your father, well, I mean, that must have been a very, very big estate. He wasn't the only one that worked there, was
no.
he?
No, I don't know how many. Oh, no, Havens must have had, I think, 20 or 30 people working for them. And because they also had horses. They needed to take care of that. There was a lot of work keeping the property up. They had gardeners. They had, well, I remember them, they had at least 3 gardeners. Mr. O'Keefe and his 2 sons took care of the land, and they would have to hire additional people for cutting wood. They'd cut wood in the swamps in the wintertime. And of course at that time it was all handwork, and horses and sleighs that were just sled runners. And they'd go down in the winter when it was frozen, because they couldn't get into it. They couldn't cut wood in the summertime because it was swamp.
Why did they always go to the swamps to cut wood? Was that the only place there were trees?
Well, it was a good use of the trees. They couldn't use them any other way. And they probably didn't limit it to swamps, but and they'd probably cut trees wherever trees needed to be cut, because of course there were many more forests than there were afterward. But and they also cut ice. They had an ice house on the property.
Is this at Havens?
Yes. And they just cut the ice in blocks and put sawdust between the blocks and packed it up in the ice house, and that was the way they preserved their food in the summertime. They'd take it from there and bring it to the house.
Did your father do all these different jobs, or did he have a specialty? Was he more of a gardener than or he took care of animals? Or he did everything.
I think to say he did everything, he did
a little of it.
Did help
Yeah.
with all of it. But I think he was responsible for overseeing it. Now, if he'd tell you that, he probably would tell you
different.
A little different. But
So, you were born at the Conley estate. So, where did you end up going to school?
in Ridgefield. Oh, well, that wasn't the... we didn't... let me see. I think Alice was born in the house we grew up in. Mary went to Stars Plain School. It doesn't... I don't think it exists anymore, does it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I think she was the only one in first grade.
She was the only one?
Yeah, in Stars Plain. And she thinks she got a superior start because of that.
She probably did.
Yeah. Maybe she talked about this already.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
So she went to Stars Plain, and then, but you didn't go there.
No, I went. We must have. Then we moved to the house we lived in, and that was.
Oh, where was that?
That's down. Do you know where the country store is?
Sure.
Down 116.
Right.
Yeah.
Joe's corner store.
Joe's
right?
store. Yeah. All right. We lived at the end of that block, just before the cemetery.
Oh, okay. On the right, as you're heading out?
Yes, on the right. Until sometime maybe in the 30s, I guess, our address was 199 Main Street. That was the end of Main Street. Then, because of changes in the postal system, houses were renumbered, and it became they changed and had the street begin at Joe's Corner, and so our house became 22 North Salem Road. But when we were growing up, it was 199 Main Street.
Now, when you left Conley's, did your father not work there anymore?
No, he didn't. Oh no, he left Conley's. I think they had a disagreement. I never really knew much about that. We didn't talk much about it, but I remember. Actually, I remember Armistice Day, and I know we were in that house at 199 Main Street. But I can't tell you anything about my life between 1914 and 1917.
No, I didn't expect that. So then you probably went to Titicus.
Yes, I did go to Tinicus 4 years. And we had a great reunion at Titicus. You know, I don't know how many years ago. 7 or 8, maybe more.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe 10. And a lot of the kids that went to Titicus came back for that.
So what grades did you have there? 1
to 4.
1 to 4? Okay.
2 rooms. First and second, third and fourth.
Do you remember the teachers?
Oh, yeah. Best Bowen I had for first and second, and a woman whose name then was Mary McGlynn. She became Mary Casper. And I don't know what other teachers were there later on.
Okay. How about, who were some of the people that were in, you must remember them since you had a reunion.
Oh,
Some of the,
oh yeah, I remember them. Well, one I especially remember was Mary Mulvaney. You might possibly have known her.
yeah.
She and I lived next door to each other. And actually, we went to school together the first day. I remember the first grade. But we, and then they moved away. I don't know just when. And but then I started going to the big school in 5th grade, and Mary and I were good friends all through school, and then we stayed friends, although not intimate in the later years. But we saw each other when I'd come home and things like that.
How about, were there a lot of Italian kids that you went to school with?
Yeah, sure. Reno Carboni, Enzo Bartolucci, I think. Then all through school, there were a lot of Italian people, of all ages.
Right.
You probably know that a great many of the Italians in Ridgefield came, first ones came roughly between 1900 and 1910 or 12 or so, and the husbands would come over and in many cases leave the wife and little kids in Italy and until they got started. And that was the case with Carbonis, for instance. Tabby Carboni, who was a well-known fellow around Ridgefield, and actually married my sister Catherine. He and his older brother and his mother followed Mr. Carboni over after a couple of years. I think Tabby came here in 1898 or 1899 also. And a good many of the Italians came from the same town. Word of mouth, I guess. And as a matter of fact, Tabby and Catherine's son, Ned Carboni, was stationed in Germany during World War II, and he and a buddy went one weekend down to the town where Tabby had come from, and walking down the street, he could recognize people because their cousins or their uncle or somebody lived in Ridgefield. And so they'd just stop a few people and say, "Are you so-and-so?" And it would be so.
Wow.
And as a result of that, somebody in that town gave a big party on Saturday night and invited Ned and the other kid, and they had a great time, all with cousins of people they knew in Ridgefield.
Oh, that must have been quite
It was almost as good as a shindig.
Wow. Well, do you remember in Titicus, kids, Italian children coming who couldn't speak English
Yes.
to school?
Yeah, I remember one. And do you know who it was? Maybe you might have known him. Cy Bedini.
Okay.
Silvio. And you know, he became a pretty good historian himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember him very well. And in many cases, I knew lots of kids whose parents, especially whose mothers, didn't know English. What they knew, they learned from the kids after the kids went to school.
Yeah.
Or they'd, I had very good friends lived next door to us. Mary, well, I knew all of them well, but I knew Mary especially, Mary Ciccoli, and Taro Ciccoli, and Nello. They were the closest to my age. And I'd be over at their house a lot, and they'd be telling their mother about something that we did or didn't do or something, and so the conversation would go like, they'd be talking mostly in Italian, movies, uptown, words they didn't know the Italian for, but and that's the way a lot of the Italian ladies learned. And
From their children. Right?
yeah, and Mrs. Ciccoli was a very good cook, and she taught my mother how to make good spaghetti sauce, and my mother taught her how to make good cake. She didn't make sweet cake with icing and stuff, but I think what she made was those little hard biscuits that have almonds in them.
Oh, biscotti.
Biscotti. Because I remember being at their house, and the father and mother, after supper, I might have sneaked over there at supper time to get some good food, you know. But Mr. and Mrs. Ciccoli would sit around at the table after supper and then have some red wine that he had made, and they'd dip the biscotti into the wine, and I didn't know what biscotti was at that time, but I really think that's how they ate it. But we had very good friendships, all the family with the Ciccolis for many years.
Excuse me. Well, now I know you said your sister married an Italian, but how did the Italian and Irish communities get along in general? Did they get along? Was there any opposition to your sister marrying an Italian in your family?
Yeah.
There was?
My father. Why, I don't know. I mean, I better not say this. I don't think I will. But there was a lot of unjustified class, I don't know what you call it. I think it's just something that was historically true, that a group, a national group, would come to the United States, mostly no matter who they were, unless they were WASPs. I don't think WASPs had the trouble, but surely the Irish were very much discriminated against. Then when they got accepted, then they started discriminating along with the others about the Italians. Well, we've seen it now. The blacks have been objecting to the Puerto Ricans. A place like New York is very obvious. They try to push one group out, prevent them from getting into an area, and pushing them out of some place that they got in that they weren't wanted. It must be just human nature, I think.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, right immediately, really, almost after Catherine and Tabby were married, it was all over with my father. I don't know. He just found it very hard to accept before they were married. And certainly none of the rest of us had any objection. I think Mary told me, my sister Mary told me, she thinks that Catherine was the first Irish girl who married an Italian in Ridgefield. So maybe that was part of it too.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first one.
Mm-hmm. But
Oh, there.
the rest of us, Mom had no objection, and certainly we didn't.
And then eventually it became pretty common.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Very. Well, because there were a lot of both Irish and Italians in Ridgefield. And many of the Italian kids became very successful men. I think the percentages would be really quite high.
So when you left Titicus, where did you go?
The big school.
The big school on the hill?
Venus School. Yeah.
Ridgefield High School. Was it called Ridgefield High School then, or was it Benjamin Franklin?
Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, okay.
But everybody called it the big school. Yeah, and I went there through high school.
5 through 12.
Yeah.
Wow.
The high school moved around. When I was in kindergarten, the high school was also that was on Bailey Avenue, and so was the high school, and the kindergarten. Well, I guess all the grades moved around through the years. Was same as is happening now.
Yeah. So you went to kindergarten at the garden school? Was that the name of it, on Bailey Avenue?
Yeah, but it wasn't called the garden school then. And I hated kindergarten. So I was a truant a lot of the time. The only thing I liked was it had a real cute little toilet. About this big.
That was the only thing you liked?
Yeah, well, I like John Nash. He was in it. But then he and I were in the same class. Once I got up to the big school, he and I were in the same class the rest of the time.
Now, is that Carl Nash's brother?
Yes.
So, now how did you get to school? Did you walk?
Different times. Sometimes we walked, and sometimes there was a bus. It wasn't our control. It was just that they, well, of course, we walked to Titicus.
Right.
Or took our sleds.
Slide right down the hill.
Yeah,
okay.
right. But I think in high school, all in high school, we walked. But I can remember also waiting for the bus at Danbury Corner. We walked more than kids do now. I think anywhere, not just Ridgefield.
Right. People, I found that with most of my interviews. There's a lot of walking.
Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm.
So, what did you do for fun?
In the winter, we skated a lot. Oh. At that time, there was a new pond, that was very popular. New Pond was sort of through the woods, down. Well, it would be. We went to it just through fields, and there was a well, pseudo road through the woods, and it was what's the name of that street? Gilbert Street. Is it New Street that goes from Gilbert Street down to Titica School?
Yes.
Yeah.
So New Pond was on New Street?
No, but
Oh.
it was there wasn't any road to the pond. It was just a trail, but it went from New Street about opposite Pound Street. Do you know Pound Street?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Over to the west, and it was a lake, small lake, with a dam at the end of it, and then up Sawmill Road, there used to be a mill there. Mm-hmm. That used to drain from the pond, and that was the chief place we went, because later on, what was that name? Outpost was developed as a lake, and then people went there. And also, there were other ponds that were used after my time, but through high school, we were still going over to New Pond, and then to Outpost. But it was a good sport through high school, and lots of kids would go, and then some kids were allowed to go at night. And they had a good fire going right near the dammed area, and the boys would always somehow keep that going, so that you could always get warmed up and things. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, and people enjoyed it a whole lot, and a lot of people went sledding. And when we were little, well, I don't know how big we were. Not high school, before high school, if we had a day off for a snow day, we got our sleds, and at that time there were farms up, especially up toward Ridgebury. But anyhow, the farmers had to. The snow didn't get cleared, the same day or things like that, and so and quite a few of the farmers had sleighs, horse driven, and so we'd go out with our sleighs and a rope for the front of it, and we'd tie our sleigh onto the farmer's sleigh, and we'd ride up and down the length of town, because they had to come for their feed, and then we'd go back up as far as we thought it was safe that we could get a hitch going back again, and some days that's all we did.
And they didn't mind hitching you up to
Oh
the
yeah,
sleigh?
some wouldn't let us. Well, I knew somebody was killed that way, and let's see, what else?
That does sound like...
And we swam.
Oh, now where did you swim?
Mamanasco. We'd hitchhike to Mamanasco. A lot of kids didn't do this, but we did. We'd hitchhike. People would give us a ride, and we seldom had to walk all the way. And you could get to Mamanasco, go up North Salem Road, and then there was a road down to the lake, down to Dixon's property. It was a private. That was all private at that time, but the Dixon family owned a lot of frontage there.
Now,
And-
was that Pond Road? Or I don't know. There's a road that's
I-
off of 116 that goes right down to the water. Right past the retreat house there, Manresa? Or,
I think that probably is. I haven't been down there, and
Okay.
I don't know whether it's that.
Well, was there actually a beach down there?
Yes, a little beach. It went down to a couple of barns that belonged to Dixons, and they let us use that. The girls use that for a dressing room, and the boys dressed in the bushes. and it was only a little, nobody could really call it a beach, but it's where we all learned to swim. And there was a big rock there. You could get up on there and sunbathe. And there was a rock halfway out, so that if you wanted to test whether you could swim a distance, you could go out that far and probably find the rock, and you could stand on that and have your head out of water.
So it was an underwater rock.
Yes, but and there wasn't any formal thing. It was just that the Dixons let us use that area, and but we'd swim most of the summer. And then we had a friend who had a car, and she had a young niece that she thought should swim, so she'd give 4 or 5 of us a ride up there anytime she was going.
So it seems like there was a mixture of cars and horses on the road at the same time.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well,
We can edit the writing part if you want. And then if you don't,
how about this part?
Well, it's hard to edit this, but
Oh.
if you get the transcription and you want to take things out, we'll talk
Oh,
about
I
that
see.
at the end.
All right.
Now, we were talking about horses and
Horses,
cars.
cars. Yeah. And cars did go much more slowly.
They did than
Sure.
they do today. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they didn't have the power anyhow, and there were fewer of them. So cars weren't such a hazard by any means.
Was North Salem Road paved, or was North Salem Road paved, or was
Yes.
it dirt? It was paved.
North Street wasn't.
Okay. So are you saying that more people rode horses than drove cars?
No,
Oh.
not. If you rode horses, you rode them on back roads, for the most part. And there was a riding academy up, well, I don't know the Stilt Court. It was up between Ledges Road and North Road in there. And people would go up there to ride and ride from there and pretty much limit themselves to back roads.
What about farmers and their wagons going into town? Those went on main roads.
Yes,
right?
they went on main roads, but most of them would be well, more like trucks. They would be, because they had to carry bags of feed or whatever. There were a few pleasure wagons, but I don't know, you didn't think of them as hazards.
Because I remember reading someone's remembrances, Joseph Tulipani, saying that when he rode the horses, the team of horses in the wagon into town, when the car came, he had to pull over and let the car go by so the horses would stay calm. They were a little bit afraid, especially
yes.
if they started beeping their horn.
Yes, well, I think that would be so. But I was just thinking of routine traffic more.
Yeah.
Oh, I think when when the horses had to stand around and stuff like that, there would be things that might frighten them. But I never had any experience with that. And of course, by the time I was even going to school, no, I guess, but depends on when you're talking. I don't think in the 30s it was that bad. No, he probably wasn't driving a team at that time.
Probably not. No.
Or if he was, he'd be in the minority. Yeah.
So the teams of horses and farmers were pretty much being phased out.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Did your father own a car?
He only had a car for work, but he didn't drive.
Oh.
There was somebody drove him all the time. He never learned to drive, and the car he had was really like a forerunner of a station wagon, and a fella that would work for him would come and take him to work, go with him to work. But then Alice and I decided we'd try to learn to drive, and anytime the car was around, first we'd check to see if there was any gas in it, and the way you check the gas with that thing, it just had a front seat and then back like a little truck and 4 posts in the top.
Oh.
And you'd take the seat, tip the seat up, open the gas tank, which was under the seat, and use a ruler and see if you had enough gas to fool around with. And then we'd back the car out of the garage, and we could fit it between the garage and a tree and get into the next lot where Chicolis lived. And then whoever was around would get in and ride, and it was a Model T Ford, so it just had a clutch, a brake, and a reverse.
Wow.
You had to crank it
To get it started?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah, right. But that's we were. I think maybe I was about 10. Al was 12 or so. But we really learned to drive cars on that car. And my mother was a very good sport. My father had a fit, but she wouldn't tell. And then Chicolis and anybody around would ride, and we'd keep checking to be sure we had gas. And when the gas was dangerously low, we just put the car back in the garage.
Now, are you saying that you just drove it around in the driveway, or did you go out on the road?
Oh no, we didn't go on the road. No, a field.
Oh,
We just
field.
go on the field.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Did you figure out how to make it work?
oh, sure. Well, you really can learn to drive a car like that just by watching somebody, watch what they do for shifting, for instance, and things like that. Because it was just, the clutch was your shift. You put it down on the clutch and down. Gas was here, spark was here.
Spark?
Huh?
Spark?
Yeah, that's to make the spark plugs work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
And so when you wanted the car to go, it didn't have a gas pedal. You're saying it had something on the steering wheel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, you were very busy because
Yes, you were. Your hands and your feet.
Yes, you had to with your hands. You had to do the gas to control how fast you went. Use the spark when you cranked the car. You had it one way, and then when it was running, you changed the spark because you're changing the speed at which the spark plugs work.
Wow.
And of course, you had to operate the windshield wiper with your hands.
Oh, with your hand. So that
Yeah.
wasn't motorized.
No,
Oh, my
that wasn't
gosh.
motorized. And you had to put your hand out if you were going to turn
Oh,
left.
there was no turn signal.
Yeah. Oh, me.
And if you smoked,
Ma-
forget it, right?
Huh?
If you smoked a cigarette at the
Yeah.
same time,
We
forget
didn't
it.
smoke in the car. We smoked. We'd smoke.
You did?
We smoked,
When you were 10?
well, probably a little bit older. I don't before we'd smoke a cigarette, we smoked leaves,
Oh.
dried leaves, and sometimes tea. Tea was not bad, and corn silk, dry corn silk, but that corn silk gave you a sore throat.
So how did you smoke leaves? Did you grind them up and put them in paper?
Yeah, I just do them like that.
And then roll them up in the paper?
Mm-hmm. Newspaper would do.
Newspaper?
We didn't smoke a lot. We just, you know, we
It was
just
just
thinking we were smart, Alec. Alice and I did it. And Ryan's, who lived across the street, one of them did it. And you get caught once in a while. But we didn't smoke very much.
Yeah. What about the Depression? Do you remember that well?
The Depression?
Yeah.
Yes. But that went on long. I mean, my chief remembrance about the Depression was when I started to work. I started to work in 1935. And for instance, anytime I think about it, I remember bread was 12 cents a loaf. Milk was 10 a quart. Butter was 35. Beer was 3 for a quarter. That's when I was living on my own money. No, but 1936 and 7, I think.
You remember that?
Yeah, the most. I remember earlier, but I was at home then, and we knew there was a depression, no question about that. But I don't remember prices. When I remember prices is when I was supporting myself.
Now, when you finished high school, did you know you wanted to teach?
No. Well, I thought I was going to probably go to normal school, because it was just about the only thing you could do, unless you wanted to be a nurse, that didn't cost, a fair amount of money. And actually, I got that Ballard Scholarship.
What was that?
Well, Mrs. Ballard had established a scholarship, and at first I think it was given every 4 years, and it happened to be our year, our class, and so I asked my father if I tried to get it and I got it, could I go? And he said yes. And however, he admitted some years later he only said it because he was sure I wasn't going to get it. So, but anyhow, that changed everything for me. But that's the other kind of figures I remember about those years anyhow. The scholarship was $300 a year for 4 years. No strings attached. I mean, about keeping your grades up or anything. And to get it, one of the things you had to do was to write something. And then I guess as a matter of fact, nobody else applied for it. I imagine because there were there were 2 boys in our class that were being tutored by one of the teachers because they expected to try to go to college. And one of them applied to Yale and he didn't get in. and I don't know. Oh, the other boy wasn't. He wasn't actually in our class, but he was doing special. He was getting tutored for a couple of years. Anyhow, I got the scholarship, and as I say, it was $300 a year for 4 years. And after I got to Barnard, I applied for the next year because they had scholarships available that were merit scholarships. You weren't supposed to apply for them if you had a lot of money, but it was all right to apply. I mean, it was considered reasonable to apply. So I applied for that, and I got $350 in addition for as long as I'd keep up my grades. So that was like $650 after the first year. And Barnard, if you didn't, if you weren't extravagant about your room and things like that, it was in a dormitory that had 7 or 8 floors, and if you applied for the second or third or fourth, those rooms were more expensive than the 7th or 8th. But that's the way the stuff was done, and it cost me, considering a couple of things that I did to try to economize, $1,000 a year, which is remarkable. Yeah, and then there was a thing called NRA. I think that went into effect. It was Roosevelt, but I think maybe in 33 or maybe 32. You could work for your department. It must have been 33 because we had our major set. So I worked for the geology department, and I did sort of interesting things, I thought. I reorganized the department library. That wasn't a big deal, but it got stuff more orderly. And I enlarged a lot of outline drawings to show progress of certain processes, and that I just enlarged them by using a planograph and taking text size illustrations and making them into classroom size. And we got 50 cents an hour for that, but we could work, I think, 20 hours a month. I forget. And I babysat for an astronomy professor. He and his wife had a little girl who lived about 8 blocks down the street, and when they'd go out, they'd hire me, and I'd just go down. I seldom had to do anything for the kid. Might have to give her supper, but mostly they'd go out a little bit later, so I'd just go and see her for a little while, and then she'd go to bed. And you'd get $1 for that, for the night. It really had, and then we also ushered at the Columbia little concert hall they had, and the only restriction about that was you had to wear an evening dress. Oh. Yes, it was high tone, but you got $1 for that too. But believe it or not, I didn't get any money from home unless somebody gave it to me for that time, and I could manage all right.
You got all your meals from school? You had?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah.
that was good.
Yeah, well, you didn't go out. You didn't go out for meals very much.
Right.
But no, I never considered it a sacrifice. That's for sure.
And so you went off to college. And what year did you graduate from high school? I didn't ask you that.
31. And
Was that a big class?
no, 24 at the end.
And how many would you say went to college out of that 24?
I think I was the only one.
Really?
Mm.
Did you think that you might come back to work after you went to college? Come back to Ridgefield?
I didn't think.
You didn't? You didn't look ahead that far.
My college. Well, I tell you, I was so damn naive or stupid or whatever you want to call it. I applied only to one college, and I didn't take the SATs. I just didn't do. I didn't know enough to.
Huh.
And nobody ever. Oh, and then the most accomplished thing I think I did was. Did you ever know Elsa Hartman? She taught in Ridgefield for a time. Well, she had gone to Barnard, and she was one of the people I used to go swimming with up at Bamanasco. And she went. She got out in 29, and she was very friendly with the admissions officer at Barnard. And the summer of 31, I hadn't found out whether I was why I had been accepted or not. But Elsa went down to some occasion at Barnard, and when she came home, she called me up and she said, "You've been accepted, Ag." she found out from the. Gosh, I shouldn't be talking like this. Should I? I don't care.
That's fine.
The registrar, her friend. She was a registrar, not the admissions officer. That I had been accepted. So I said, okay, fine. not really knowing, that this was anything until one time I don't know, a month or two later. Alice, my sister Alice, had a friend up in Danbury, and she happened to know that she happened to have a friend who also was going to go to Barnard that I hadn't known at all. So they suggested that we have a picnic so that Dot Melvin and I could meet. So we did, and when we had the picnic, Dot said, she was all shook up. She had applied to 5 or 6 colleges. She hadn't heard whether she got into Barnard. And she was really itchy, but just for doing everything the way anybody with any sense would do it. Oh gosh! Well, but she was accepted.
Wow. So what happened after you graduated?
I went to Northwestern. Supposedly to get my master's. When I graduated, nobody got a job. I shouldn't say that. I knew nobody who had gotten a job, and I really knew a lot of the kids. You went home, you got married, you went to business school, or you went to graduate school. And the geology professor I had, the assistant to the professor that I had been at Northwestern. She had gotten her master's at Northwestern. At that time, Northwestern was sort of specializing in geology master's students. And so I guess Dr. Ogilvy got me that. That was sort of a surprise to me. I didn't go digging for that at all, but anyhow, she gave me the idea, and you could go you could get your master's in 2 years, and in the meantime, you taught laboratory to the freshmen were at Northwestern. And so I got accepted for that. And I went to Northwestern, thinking I was going to stay there 2 years and get my master's that way. Because, and we only had to pay half tuition if we taught laboratory. That was the whole deal. And so I did that, went the first year. In the summertime, I took a summer course at University of Chicago, a field course. And I when I was at Northwestern, I lived with a girl from up in Illinois. Very, very nice person. I mean, we remained friends until she died a few years ago. And we lived in a professor's home. He and his wife had no children. They had a good-sized house. He was a geography professor, but they gave the 2 upper floors, like the second floor, and maybe sort of like had originally been an attic, to graduate students. So this Jean Todd and I shared a room and a bath. We had that part of the second floor, and then 4 boys had the third floor, and they were all master students too. And we had a ridiculously low rent for that. And then the other thing that they did that was very nice of them, in their basement, they made a little kitchen. And they had a refrigerator and a stove of some kind, and kitchen furniture. And they let us, if we wanted to, let us make our breakfast and lunch there. And we were available for tutoring. Jean went to the sororities, and I went to the dormitories that had non-sorority people, and we were available for tutoring a certain night a week, and maybe a little extra at exam time, and for that we got our dinners at a restaurant.
Wow.
That was fine. It was a Greek man who had the restaurant, and we all ate there anyhow. So Jean had to go to the sorority houses for her dinners, but I just had to go to the restaurant downtown. So that we spent very little money, but it worked, and we had a good time. But then in November of the second year, I got offered a job in New York, and it was because somebody who had been at Northwestern, and I had known her, she was studying for her doctors, and she had gotten her doctors, and so she got this job at the Geological Society in New York. And she was there for about 6 months, and she didn't like it at all. And then in that 6 months, she got offered a job in Washington in geology, and at more money. So she told me it was just for fun because she knew I wouldn't take it. But anyhow, she recommended me for the job, and I grabbed it.
You did?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I much preferred being offered a job than finishing my master's degree. And I never saw it. They never saw me. But I had a couple of good recommendations. The professor at Barnard recommended me, and I think the man who was really the head of the Geological Society office in New York, although he only knew me very casually, but he recommended me. And the first they saw me was the day I turned in for work. Then they had me. I don't know what they'd have done if they thought I was awful. But anyhow, much to my friend who had turned the job down thought she was so surprised that I liked it. I really liked it, and I stayed there for 25 years.
Wow.
But I think it was a very interesting experience. That was, the Depression, those years. It wasn't any fun when my father didn't have any work for quite a while, and that bothered him a great deal. But and my sister Mary got fired. She taught in Stanford, and they fired all non-Stanford people, all the teachers, in order to give the Stanford teachers work. So she was out of work for more than a year, and when she went back to teaching, she finally got a job, and I think it was $1,200 a year. And she had been teaching for several years, 5 maybe.
How many of your sisters were teachers?
3, Margaret and Mary and Alice.
So when Margaret went back to teaching, where did she go?
No, Mary.
Oh, Mary, sorry.
Ridgefield.
Oh, she did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Alice, I know she taught at St. Mary's School, but did she teach other places as
Yeah,
well?
before she was married, she taught in New Canaan. And then she stopped teaching when she got married. And when her husband died, she went back to first substituting, and then St. Mary's, and then Ridgefield.
Now, what did you do at the Geological Society? What was your schedule like?
Well, I was hired to do editorial work. Geological Society was an endowed place. A geologist who made a lot of money gave the society, I think, something like $6 million in 1929. He had not invested his money. He put it in a box and kept it. But the Geological Society, $6 million was a lot of money at that time, and they expanded the publication program they had. They supported research by geologists, and they conducted meetings, sectional meetings. The membership was mostly people active in geology, and there were probably more doing teaching or working for the U.S. Geological Survey, some oil people, and some mining. And then they published, submitted papers or materials for books, whatever, and a monthly journal. And I was hired to be an assistant in the editorial department. And then I was there so long. That's one reason. I eventually became the managing editor, and then I became the head of that office.
Oh.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was very interesting work. I really liked it a whole lot, and I think I probably knew most of the really good geologists in the country, and that was really well. I I thought it was great to know them. And but eventually, when they appointed me to be the head, I had in the meantime gotten very interested more in the publications part of it, and I think I had pretty good training just by doing the stuff in publications work and editorial thing, and I was interested in the publications being real good. But when they had me, when they promoted me to running the place, I found I really didn't like administration, and I told them so, and said I would really like them to hire some other head, and they thought, it's very interesting reactions. They thought I was being modest, because here, one fellow said to me, here it is, it's really a male organization. There are many more men in it than women, and here we ask a woman to run it. Well, that may be so, but I just didn't want it. And that they didn't pay any attention to me about that. And I finally got to the state where I was only working. My personal life was way in the background, and they knew what I thought, and but they didn't really take it seriously. So I decided I had to quit. And but they were fun. They have geologists have great humor, I tell you. But they had a meeting about it, the board, and a fellow who was president was a very attractive physicist from Harvard, but a good geologist too. And so they were going to have this meeting, and they said, Agnes, or this man said, Agnes, come in here and lie down on this couch till we see what's the matter with you. So I said, at that time I was commuting, and I used to ride with a man that another woman and I picked up when we were waiting for a bus to go to the railroad station from Columbia, and he came along, and he always took a cab. So we thought we better latch on to him. We want to go to that station too. So we picked him up, and then I got to know him real well. And so when they asked me about, what was my trouble, so I just said, well, I tell you, Francis, I'm going to work for a man I sleep with on the train going home. Because that's what I did. I'd always sleep going back and forth on the train. But he was really good. He said to me, well, tell him for me he has a very unfair advantage. But they were like that. They were really, they were all real smart men. But they had a very good, well, almost everyone that I met there had great sense of humor. And one fellow told me, one fellow I knew pretty well, I was talking to him about it, about the fact that I thought geologists in general had a very good sense of humor. And he said he thinks it's because they realize how unimportant they are in geological terms. Which may be so. So then I did go to work for Don Carl, the man I slept with going home. and I went to the college board. Oh. But, well, and I worked there for about 10 years, and then I retired.
Now, when you say you were commuting, you were coming from town?
No, Stanford.
Oh, so I lived commuting from Stanford. Okay.
Yes, I lived in Stanford. for
And where was the College Board? Was that in New York?
yes, for most of the time it was up in a house just off the campus at Columbia. It was because the man who really was responsible for getting the endowment money was a professor at Columbia, and that's where the first offices of the society were. And we stayed there until Columbia needed the space for expansion. It was a Columbia building, and they wanted to tear it down and do something else with the land. So we went down to 46 East 46th Street near the UN building.
Do you still go into the city ever?
I haven't been in gosh, I guess it's a year. But yes, I kept up because I have good friends, and I go in for lunch.
You do?
That's about what I would. Well, I could just go in and wander around New York and think it's fun, and then after I retired a while, one friend of mine and I still meet for lunch, or I'll go in the day to New York, or the other alternative is we meet in Stamford. I go down from here and she comes up and we have lunch, or occasionally she might come up here, and also occasionally I might just go into New York and go to her apartment for lunch. But it's just we like to keep in touch with each other, and those are the alternatives. But that's the chief reason I go in, is to walk around or to meet somebody for lunch. I'm going to start it again, though. I have arthritis, and my knee was getting very bad, but I now have a new knee.
Oh, you had a knee replacement?
Mm-hmm.
How did that work out for you?
It's working out. I just had it in October, so I'm not really all reconnected, I guess. No, it seems to be all right. Very nice doctor.
Now, you retired, and then you decided to move back to Ridgefield.
Yes, I retired about 1985, I guess. And I lived for a good many years with a friend of mine, and we had a house in Stamford.
Sounds like...
Didn't know we had chickens so near. Do you know that's a talking clock? And must say it's 12 o'clock.
Is that
the
yours?
rooster?
Is that yours? Oh.
It's a present.
It's 12 o'clock.
It's at 12 o'clock until 12:01, I have discovered.
Does it do it at midnight, too?
I didn't hear it.
Oh.
I was wondering, I think it's just when it's 12:01.
Oh.
No, 12 a.m.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yes, that's what I say. Well, it's supposed to announce every hour. I didn't hear it do that. I didn't.
No.
And I don't know how to turn it off. I can't stop that. I can't even stop the clock.
You know, these modern gadgets.
Yeah.
So where were we? Oh, yeah, you retired in 1985.
It's reminding us, this is too long.
We're almost done.
That's good.
We're almost at the end. So you came back to town in 1985. Oh, wait, no, you had lived in Stamford.
Yeah, but my friend was not well and she died, and I really decided I didn't like living in a house by myself. although it was a very nice place, and a very nice street, and I still go down to see friends there a lot. Yeah. But well, I just decided it would be better in an apartment if I'm by myself. So.
That's when you came here?
Yeah. I came here in 1993, I guess. And it's been all right.
Mm-hmm.
I missed a garden a lot, but I have a garden now, community gardens.
Oh, do you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And did you feel like town had changed quite a lot since you left?
2 generations. Yeah, that is right. When I first came back and I'd meet somebody that I thought I knew the name or something, I finally would have to say, well, if you tell me what your grandmother's maiden name was, I'd probably know you. But that's really about the way it has been. But I have met some very, very nice people again, either again or new people.
All right.
I took some bridge lessons when I came back, and I met some nice people. That and 4 of us who sat at the same table when we were taking the lessons. One lady said, "We better do something or we'll forget everything we learned." So we started playing once a week, and although we're not the same 4, we continued it one way or another. Well, the 4 of us stayed together for about a year, and then one girl decided she didn't want to devote the time to it, and she wanted to learn pottery.
Oh.
So we got a substitute for her, and then things changed, and the 2 of us from the original table are still hanging on.
There. So you must be pretty good by now.
No, I'm not. I'm the poorest of the bunch. But I like it, and they put up with me. I don't study enough. But that's the way. But I'm pretty content.
Okay. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you?
No.
No?
I didn't want to talk about it.
You didn't want to talk at all?
It's special, no.
Well, I think we
Is there anything you wanted to talk about?
No, I think I've hit everything. No. I just want to thank you. It's been a really great interview. Thank you.
Oh.
It really has been. Really, I learned a lot.
Well, yes, that doesn't make it a good.
Well, you had a lot of very interesting stuff. A lot of Ridgefield history. I learned a lot about the Conley estate. I learned a lot about what life was like when you were. I mean, it is amazing to me that life was that.
Simple?
It was so country.
Sure.
So much country.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yes.
It's always interesting to hear about the wealthy families and the people that worked for them.
Yeah.
It was an unusual, I think, situation. It's not something you'd see today.